Previously on the Vocal Minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Motherfuckers, go! Attention, please!
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through radio shows like this new kind.
This shit here feels like a whole entire world collapse.
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
Hey, what's good? Welcome to another episode of the Vocal Minority Report. It's your boy MC. As always, you could have downloaded any podcast in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. Got a good show for you. We have one of my podcast, public radio idols on the show, Jesse Thorn. He's so much more than that, and we'll get into that in this conversation. So thanks for everybody for downloading. Hope you enjoy. Make sure you go to Facebook, like the Facebook page, Vocal Minority Report. Go to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating and review. Follow us on SoundCloud, like the episodes. Make sure you tweet, retweet, use the hashtag the Vocal Minority so we can spread this thing. Our guest today is a true Renaissance man, pioneer and creator. He's a proprietor of MaximumFun.org, where he oversees a network of more than 20 podcasts. He's been called the most important man in entertainment you've never heard of. He was the youngest national host in public radio history and is now the host of Bullseye, presented by NPR. He's still bringing satin for them draws, velvet for the mic, and a pound for the cause. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jesse Thorn to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for being here, man. How's it going for you today?
It's going okay. It's going better anytime I hear the wise words of Shock G on the 5 on It remix.
Yes, sir, man. Yeah, that's I saw him in person. Him and Scarface did a concert in Dallas. It's probably been like 2 or 3 years ago, but yeah, actually, I got to hear the man do that verse in person. But yeah, now, so that makes me like, you already have all kinds of cred with me and a lot of our audience, but well, I guess you're from the Bay, so I guess it makes sense that you'd be into the Loonies. But yeah, that gives you another level of cred with me.
Yeah, I mean, that record was like, I don't know, when did that come out? 94, 95?
Yeah, I'm thinking like 95, right?
Yeah, so I was 14. So you can imagine that was literally the only record on KMEL, the People Station.
Okay.
At all. Like, it was just like, oh, great. Technically they'd alternate. So you'd go, first you'd hear 5 on It, then you'd hear 5 on It, Bay Ballers remix.
Okay.
Hear 5 on It.
I got you. Yeah, no, and they're both so classic. See, and that's good because I guess I was 13 when it came out, so it's the music of my childhood. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I feel you on that because the remix, and that's one of the songs where the remix is better than the original. You know, and I couldn't even. I mean, I guess I could probably sing the. You know, I feel like the remix is just much more because which one has Oh wait a minute.
I mean that really is. And we should not get into this too much because whoever is listening right now is being alienated by this conversation. But like that is undoubtedly like top 5 all-time rap songs with too many people on it.
Right, it is.
Like the elegance of the 17 people that are on that song, how smoothly everyone fits together and how much it feels like an actual song despite literally every rapper in the entire Bay Area being on that track.
Is Drew Down on that too, or is he on the original?
Oh, you know Drew Down is on that.
Okay, all right.
His silky ass hair.
Right.
His shoulder length Goldilocks curls.
Yes, sir. Drew. Okay. Yeah. Now that. Yes. And that video. And that's back in the day. And I know. And I've realized here recently that more music videos are made than obviously when you're a kid. I'm watching MTV and BET all day, and VH1 and The Box, and different things like that. So saw a lot of videos back in the day, but that's also just such a classic video too. Like it's just everything is perfect about that remix, the video. Like it just all goes together.
I think that was the golden moment where E40 really perfected messing with his glasses to incredible effect.
Yes,
like,
sir.
Looking into a camera and then just like slightly adjusting his glasses and maybe going, ooh.
E40 Fonzarelli, baby. Yeah, man. That's Yeah, I love E40, man. Yeah, no, it's, you know what? I guess, man, you know, you think about staying power, you know, like you said, we would alienate people, but with this music conversation, but I'll tell you, I had on Kevin Avery, you know, from last week.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you know Kevin Avery.
Yeah, sure. I've known Kevin for a long time. Yeah.
See, I don't have to. I don't have to. You won't be in.
Stand-up comic television writer and former rapper in a boy band.
Exactly.
Avery.
Exactly. Yes, sir. That's the man. So I was. He and I were on, and we went almost 2 hours, and I think about half an hour that was talking about R&B music and the boys and Soul for Real. So yeah. So the audience is used to being alienated by obscure or heavily nuanced old school talk. Just so we're good there.
I feel like Kevin is part of this comedy tour that I've been trying to put together in my mind forever, which is comedians who became comedians after they failed at being rappers. Matt Bronger also was a rapper. And like anytime I find out that a comedian I like used to be a rapper, and usually it's like in college or whatever, it's just the most wonderful news to me.
Right.
It's the most glorious news. And Matt Bronger is just like a big doofy looking white guy whose like whole screen career is based on playing dumb, genial white guy neighbors.
Right.
And the fact that he had a rap career is the greatest thing I've ever heard. He's also one of the funniest guys on earth and a lovely dude. I don't want to mischaracterize him here.
No.
But
well, aren't they all though? I mean, so is Kevin, right? But see, the funny thing about that is that so I know who he is because of White Flight on Comedy Central. So I know. So when you said, I'm like, wait a minute, you talking about that guy? That dude was a rapper, but okay. You know, I guess he's got skills though. All right, well, you know, but I guess that goes to the acting side of rapping for some folks. You know, not that Kevin and Matt were destined for Eminem and Jay-Z fame, but you know, but there's that, I guess that level of acting or character, you know, trickles over, or I don't know. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
yeah, I think that's true. I think that also, you know, I think they definitely both appeal to people who want attention.
Okay, right.
But then also, I think it's like a certain kind of nerd that becomes, and I think people don't imagine. Sometimes people don't think of rappers as being nerds, not least because they're often black, and people have a hard time wrapping their head around that cultural construct.
And actually, me and Kevin talked about the whole nerd thing. So yeah, it's an odd
rappers. Like what is the RZA if not the nerdiest nerd ever? That guy is into chess and obsessing over kung fu movies.
Right.
That's like the two nerdiest things that he might as well be into Dungeons and Dragons, which Busta Rhymes probably is into.
Right, and I mean they made their own language. I mean, come on now, right? Yeah, what's nerdier than that? Right.
You know, maybe some of them are nerds that have sold a few rocks in their day, but who among us hasn't?
Hey, you know, hey, you can't knock the hustle, right? You know what I mean? Like you got to do what you got to do, you know. Hey, ODB was taking his limo to go get food stamps. So I mean, you know, like it is what it is.
Yeah.
But R.I.P. ODB. But
yeah.
All right, well, yeah. So okay, now that we've touched on that, I want to get into music a little later on. But so we've touched on it here up front, which is good. Shoot, you know, talking to you and about you. You know, you've got so many shows that you create, host, or produce. Can you give us a rundown and kind of give us an overview of MaximumFun.org and one of my favorite shows, Bullseye?
Yeah, sure. So Maximum Fun is an audience-supported podcast network of now, I think we have 30 now, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Track.
Gotcha.
But, you know, I created the network sort of out of necessity years ago, basically as a way to try and make money out of the podcast of my public radio show. And these days, my public radio show, which started as my college radio show at UC Santa Cruz at the beginning of the 2000s, is distributed by NPR. So we make it here in Los Angeles in our own office, and then it airs on NPR stations around the country. That show's called Bullseye, and it's an arts and culture interview show. And then I also do 2 comedy shows, a podcast called Jordan Jesse Go that has been running for coming up on 10 years now, with my close friend Jordan Morris, who's a writer on At Midnight on Comedy Central, and a comedian of various kinds. And he and I started. He co-hosted The Sound of Young America with me when we were in college, my college radio show, the aforementioned college radio show.
Right.
And that show is just completely formatless bullshit. It's just nonsense completely. If I had it to go back, I would give it a format or just some reason for people to listen. But what's done is done.
Right, no doubt.
And then,
I think it paid off pretty well for you.
Yeah, well, we've won. I was going to say we won awards. I don't know if that's actually true. We've received some commendations of various types. People like it. The people that like it like it.
Right, right.
Tens of thousands of people.
Hey, that's enough.
And then I do a show called Judge John Hodgman with another very long time close friend of mine, John Hodgman, who folks might know from The Daily Show, or from most recently Married on FX, or as the PC in the Mac PC commercials, or from his books, or any of a million things. But basically,
okay, I know who that is. Okay,
yeah. So basically, he's the judge. He is like Judge Judy, and then I'm the bailiff. So I'm basically like Roz from Night Court.
Right. Okay.
And then we have real people with real personal disputes, couples and parents and children, and all kinds of combinations of people who have actual beef with each other. And we hash it out on the air, and Hodgman is both hilarious and wise. And I sort of yell something at someone once in a while.
Man, I haven't heard that show before, but I was reading about it today and doing some prep for this. And here's a secret about me. I love Judge Mathis, watch it every day. And so if you're telling me that you've got a podcast that blends my love of court TV drama and podcast, I cannot wait to listen to this. I'm sorry I'm behind the curve on that, because that sounds awesome. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like on Judge Mathis, it's mostly like, I left my car at the airport parking lot, and when I got it back, there was a dent in the door. Like on our show, it's more like me and my brother bought a house together, and bats keep coming in, and I want to fix the hole that the bats are coming into, but my brother doesn't.
Okay, all right, I got you. Okay, so I got so
that's a real case that we really dealt with.
Okay, okay. So you go a little deeper. You're a little less superficial. It sounds like. Okay, I got you. You're truly bringing families back together. I understand.
Oh, for real. A lot of it is about just weird. There's basically only 2 categories of cases on Judge John Hodgman. One of them is, I'm a nerd and I've got this system that is better than social convention. So like whatever it is, there was a woman who came on and she had this friendship point system that ranked how close she was to everyone she knew.
Okay.
And that she would tell people what their ranking was.
Oh, wow.
And needless to say, that upset the shit out of her friends.
Of course.
They were not having that.
And
she was apparently...
I should sell her my self-aware meter. Yeah.
So there that, or it's just like dads who are embarrassing.
Okay.
Like embarrassing dads is a solid 40% of the show. Like there was this dad, we had this dad on recently where no matter what service employee he was talking to, the first thing he would say was, yeah, can I get an order of Kung Pao chicken? And it was like his kids were like, look, this was cute when we were 6.
Right.
Once, but he's been doing it for the last 15 years. And one time he did it at a Japanese restaurant, and we're pretty sure that's racist.
Right. Oh my gosh. Jeez. Okay. So what was the disposition of that? So how do you guys, the judge rule, or John Hodgman rule, and then as far as what's the usual outcome, or how did the people, the litigants, for lack of a better term, how do they take it? How does the show wrap? I guess is the question.
The Judge Hodgman, as I'm bound to call him.
Yes, sir.
He works very hard to find the emotional center of the dispute.
Okay.
And I think that is a great gift of his. He calls it the crux, you know. He looks for what is this disagreement really about, because it's rarely about, you know, whether a weird dad can start growing his Santa beard out during the summer or if he has to wait till the fall, you know?
Right.
Like it's always about some emotional relationship between the people involved. And so his judgments are often as much about that emotional relationship as they are about settling the case, you know, deciding who's right and who's wrong. And so I think that's why it's a show, even when sometimes the disputes are kind of ridiculous. Like you said, the stakes are high, and like in some ways there are often cases where the functional real world stakes, the day-to-day stakes, the tangible stakes are actually relatively low. You know, no money is changing hands or anything like that.
Right.
There are things that are really about real personal relationships, and he gets to them. And it's also funny, and also I yell at people.
Hey, no, well, hey, I like funny. I like people yelling at people, and I like the thing about when I watch Judge Mathis, because you realize when it's like personal disputes, you realize that it is so much more than obviously who cares about $300. There's always some real emotional breakdown, you know, in that relationship. So, I'd be interested to hear how you guys handle that. So, and to hear you yell. So, yeah, no, that's cool. So, now, all right.
Yeah, there's 100% more me yelling on Judge John Hodgman than there is on my NPR show.
Oh, well, that's good. All right. Well, then I want to see that other side or hear that other side of you. So, okay, cool. All right. Sometimes you just got to yell, because sometimes people are, they need to be yelled at. They need that. That, you know, they need that pointed direction, and sometimes that you have to do it at a higher decibel than normally. You know, it is what it is. But all right, so we talk about you and podcasting and everything. So I mentioned that a couple of things about, you know, you're such a fascinating person, really. I mean, I don't just say that because I'm talking to you. You know, we're in this day and age of content curation that appears to be the new phrase for folks to, you know, they're curators, then, you know, of whatever, you know. And so I wonder how you can see yourself. Do you see yourself as like a pop culture curator? That might be a little too generic or even too narrow, but is that a good way to describe you?
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially on Bullseye. You know, like a big part of what we're doing on Bullseye is picking not just the people with the most compelling stories, but the people with the most compelling work, and the people that, you know, some of them might be folks that you've heard of, some of them might not, but they're people that we want to bring to broader attention and give deeper thought to.
Right.
And so, you know, that's a pretty broad swath of people, but what they have in common, and this is something we hear a lot from our listeners, is that they are people whose work, you know, we are genuinely enthusiastic about, that we want to share these people and what they do in a way that might not be the case with, you know, the arts beat reporter at a local newspaper who just gets sent out to stuff.
Right. Okay.
And that's a hard job. I'm not denigrating that person. I'm just saying that it's a very different situation. What we're doing, you know, we're really trying to find and share the best stuff.
It's one reason why I really like your show is that, you know, you're a blend of what's popular, but you also have an eye and an ear on kind of the past and kind of how we got here for that's kind of how I look at it. So for instance, you know, you've had guests like Bootsy Collins and Mavis Staples, right? You know, like just, you know, like, I mean, to me, I mean, you know, and obviously you've got all kinds of current, extremely relevant people that you talk to, but I love the fact that you go back and pay homage, and like you said, you're enthusiastic about speaking to those type of people and everybody you talk to. So I love how you blend that, you know, where this pop culture could be also, you know, hipping somebody to, you know, again, the things that kind of put us on track to where we are. So I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit, I don't know, there's probably no question there, but if you can speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like in the kind of show that we do, when we're talking to people for, I usually sit down with people for an hour, and I feel like folks who've been there and have some perspective on their lives and their careers are often the best subjects.
Right.
Especially when it comes to creative people. And I also feel like, I'm from a generation where the culture of all times is similarly accessible to me. So,
right.
I think this is something that people who are, about my age and younger, I'm in my mid-30s, almost expect that all culture, and especially music, is going to be is accessible to them, that it's part of their world. And so there's less difference between the music of somebody my age and liking caring about Bootsy Collins than somebody, my mom was born in the early 40s, and I can't imagine her sitting around doing the Charleston.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I know that I certainly have plenty of peers that love Parliament. So
okay, right.
It's a very different era, and I think that to some extent shows like ours, or outlets like ours, I should say, that are focused on curation often are about, what's the next thing? And I don't really care that much about that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm glad we have plenty of next things on the show.
Right.
But that quality of being ahead of the curve is less important to me than someone who's fantastic. And to my mind, it doesn't matter that much if they're 20 years old or 60 years old, or I guess Mavis Sable's probably in her mid-70s.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, for me, it's about like, what does this person have to say, and like, what can we learn from this person, and does this person has this person made great work? And
you capture that, you talk to them, and you ask, and see, and the thing about, you ask the right questions too. I'm like, well, you got to talk to Bootsy about James Brown, and you did it, I mean? So obviously you're a skilled interviewer, but yeah, I like the points that you touch on when you do that. So
I think it's fair to say that by far the most important point for me to touch on in that Bootsy Collins interview, and one that I'm not afraid to say that I did, was for me to say, "Hey, Bootsy, you're a superstar, right?" And then have Bootsy say back, "Twinkle, twinkle, baby bubble."
Okay, touche. You know what? Touche. There you go. Yeah, with the yeah. I guess him saying that with the star glasses, right? Yeah, no, you must live for that. I wonder. Well, maybe that's too strong because
no, that one I live for. That one,
yeah.
Getting to say to Bootsy, "You're a superstar, right?" And then having him say back, "Twinkle, twinkle, baby bubble," is like literally the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life.
Okay, good.
That's
all right.
Better than the birth of my children. Yeah, no, that was like, I can't even imagine like staring, like being 12 or 13 years old and like staring at the name is Bootsy Baby with the giant illustration of Bootsy and his star glasses on the front cover or something.
Right.
And thinking that one day I would not only talk to him, but do, and like, yeah, no, I love that stuff. It's so fun. Judy Greer came on the show, was on Arrested Development, among other things.
Oh yeah.
And she's on Archer, and she's just so great in everything that she's in. And I love Archer. I love Archer so much. And not only did I get her to say with me her catchphrase from one of the seasons of Archer, which was "Outlaw Country," but she also, like, completely unbidden at the end of the interview went, "Say goodbye to these," which was something she said on Arrested.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, Judy Greer just said that to me. No, she's a real human being, and we're talking.
Right. Okay, see, that's good, man. Because I'm glad that you're not at a point where you're nonplussed by those moments where you've got that connection, or like you're really like, okay, like we're doing it. Like that's you just gave me who you are. So yeah, so no, okay, that's good. Yeah, because you've talked to so many people. Like, do you ever? I mean, are you always excited to and enthusiastic when you're talking to a guest? You know, like is everyone has something there that, you know, because obviously you don't know that she's going to say that, but
So I see where you're driving. I mean, I still, you know, it's unusual that I'm nervous about an interview anymore. Although not never. When I am nervous these days, it's usually about a somewhat more practical concern. Like I'm worried, I have actual reason to believe that I might not do a good job. Like, I interviewed earlier today, Sarah Paulson, who's an actress who played Marcia Clark on The People versus O.J. Simpson recently, and is nominated.
Played her beautifully, right? Amazingly.
Yeah, she's spectacular. Yeah, she's spectacular.
And she's on The Walking Dead too, right? Right. Like
she's on American Horror Story.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. And she's a spectacularly good actress. And there's so much in The People versus O.J. Simpson, and you know, and I was worried that I would fuck it up somehow.
Okay.
But I didn't. It went fine. She's great, and it was fine.
All right.
But like being nervous about it doesn't have to come up that much, and I think it's kind of a funny thing. Like I've done this for such a long time that it's very, very, very rare that I have any kind of awe or any kind of intimidation factor from a guest. So, I mean, a little bit here and there. I interviewed John Cleese in his hotel room one time.
Yeah.
A little bit there. That was not that long ago. Bill Withers has been on the show a couple times. He's a very intimidating man. He's very big and handsome and does not take any shit from anybody.
Really? Oh, okay.
Least of all, I'm just going to go ahead and project here some little white dude. But that's fine. He's earned that.
Right.
But that's very rare. I mean, even if it's somebody really famous or something, once in a while, somebody being really good looking throws me off my game. That's a little weird. Just like super good looking people, like people who are in movies are crazy good looking. Like they're like significantly better looking in real life than they are in the movie.
Right.
And you're like, fuck, what is that? And you just, the whole time, you just want to be like, hey, what's it like to be so good looking?
Right.
But you can't ask that question. So you have to think of a different way to ask it if you want to ask it. So like once in a while, a little bit that, but mostly it's not that big of a worry anymore. I've been doing it so long. And so the nice thing about that is you realize, oh, like this is just a guy, or this is just a lady, this person's not any better than me.
Right.
Like, granted, they might be more talented than me at this thing. Presumably they're more talented than me at this thing that I'm talking to them about. But like, that's not, that doesn't make them anything other than just a person who's talented at a thing, I'm talented at things. You're talented at things, whatever. It's things, whatever. Things broke their way, whatever. They're just a human being. And that doesn't, what's nice is that doesn't, I don't lose any of the reverence for the fact that they've done wonderful things in the world. I think that's great. I think it's awesome. And I often love the work they do. And I usually really like the people too, almost always.
Okay.
But, that kind of liberates me to talk to the person like they're a person,
Right.
Because if you don't, it's hard to get anywhere. You end up hosting the Chris Farley show.
Right.
And that's not much, that's not much of anything. So,
yeah.
Even somebody who's like, a walking angel on earth, like Mavis Staples, is still just a lady, it's just like somebody's grand aunt,
Grand aunt, right? Yeah, no, right, yeah.
like,
And I found, in my limited talks with celebrities or people of note or whatever. Yeah, I mean, like and obviously listen to a lot of interviews too. Like they want to be treated as regular people too. Like so so when you can find that connection, like okay, you drove over here, or you still got to go, fill up your car or do whatever. You're still a regular person in spite of your great talent and all that stuff. So yeah, no, for sure. Or esteemed royalty and some of the people you've spoken with for sure. So basically it'll get better for me is what I have to look forward to. All right, that's good. So, but no, so, all right. So let's talk about, I mentioned in the intro, youngest national host in public radio history. We've talked about a little bit how you took your college radio show and turned that into Bullseye and being picked up. Well, eventually Bullseye and being picked up by NPR and all the things you've done since then. So, you're an authority on a lot of things, but, as far as the present and future of podcasting, I know you've spoken on that previously. So I just want to, for having put a show out in 2004, I believe it was, right? And now 12 years later, and, you've got public radio, you've got all kinds of a footprint in podcasting. Where do you think we are now podcasting with so many shows and so many, like trying to gain audience, and then just where do you think this podcast medium is going as far as, and then I want to kind of get into independent media as a whole as well.
I mean, I think that, the fantasy of internet media is that it is this huge level playing field, that all things are equal and the cream rises to the top and so on and so forth. And that's really a beautiful, that's a beautiful idealistic vision of how the internet works circa 1994.
Okay. Back when the loonies were,
yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. When the loonies were trying to get somebody to buy loonies.net.
Right.
The tricky bit is that the more choice there is, the more paralyzing it is for the consumer, and the more they rely on shortcuts and shorthand. And so podcasting in some ways has been very lucky. I think that the broader media publishing industry has been hit really hard by social media and the ways that they have to sort of change what they make to fit the distribution model of mostly Facebook.
Right.
But also to some extent Twitter, Pinterest, so on. That has, podcasting has not benefited from that, but has in some ways, in not benefiting from it, has been protected from it. But the truth is, it's like anything else. If you're a famous person going in, a lot more people are going to give it a try. And now that there are moderately famous people, it's no longer remarkable news for Anna Faris to start a podcast.
Right.
Which she does have a podcast. I've heard it's really great. I interviewed her one time. She was really awesome. I think she's great.
Yeah, no, she's really funny, and I know she has a show because I see it on the iTunes thing. She wears like a captain's hat or something in the when they feature her on iTunes on the podcast app. So
yeah, I think it's called Captain's Hat with Anna Faris.
Oh.
So, I think in some ways we've been protected from all that. And it's tough. It's tough to get noticed. One of the reasons that we have a network is because, it helps us connect our audience with other things they might like.
Right.
But it's not impossible. And the good thing is that the playing field right now remains relatively even. So, on the one hand, it's harder to get attention from your average Joe on the street if you don't have a name and you don't have a compelling premise and that kind of thing. But on the other hand, Apple has never charged for access to iTunes or for preferential placement in iTunes. And so that has always been driven by editorial choices, which have always been reasonably fair and high-minded. And the other podcast apps is similar situations generally. So I think it's a really good time, both for consumers and for creators. The main thing that's going on is everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket now. So there's a machine that makes podcasting 10 times easier than it was 10 years ago to listen to.
Right.
And, we're getting to the point where the main listening instance in most people's life is in the car. So, I know I have a newish car and it even has internet inside the car, but that's all. It's awful. It's completely unusable. I don't even know what it's supposed to be for.
Okay.
But the car technology moves on a much slower pace than consumer technology because for a variety of reasons it has to be super durable and stuff. So, hopefully in 5 years, 10 years, we'll have consistently cars that are really easy to listen to podcasts in. And my hope as somebody who is, remains essentially an independent creator, my hope is that those portals remain as open as podcasting has been the last 10 years. And I don't think that's a sure thing, but it is my hope, we've gone further, more and more of the internet is closed gardens, as they say.
Okay.
Places like Facebook where one company with a profit motive is controlling who hears what and who sees what. And my hope is that podcasting will continue to be relatively egalitarian, at least on the front end. There's some things people are always going to prefer trying something they've already heard of. They're always going to prefer celebrities to non-celebrities.
Right.
All of those things will always be the case. But my hope is that we won't morph into a pay-to-play situation. And I'm reasonably hopeful for that. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, and obviously, as someone who creates content, and I'm hoping the same thing. So I'm glad to get your perspective on kind of where we are and where we're going to go. So let me ask you this. So we talk about internet media, and you mentioned being independent, and so how important is independent media, right? Like in our theme song to the show, which I know you haven't heard, but I have a clip from Dick Gregory, and he was on comedian Rodney Perry's show one time, and I was listening, and I'll paraphrase what he said, but basically he said, if America can be saved, it'll be through radio shows like this. He went on to say, then he went on to kind of rail against NBC, CBS, and ABC, and they're part of a wicked, evil system, and it's not true freedom of speech. So anyway, I'm interested in your opinion on that as it relates to this medium and this paradigm, that shift that we're in when we talk about, cars will eventually possibly be formatted more so for podcasts, and we talk about the smart technology that's already in them. But, but just overall, as far as the power of independent media and how folks like you who is certainly a veteran, versus both public radio and podcasting, how do you see that as your role in overall disseminating information to the people and versus, actual, the large conglomerates? Do you what do you think, our role is, or your role is in that?
Well, I think fundamentally, there is a fundamental challenge in most for-profit broadcasting. And my company is for-profit, so I'll be clear about that. But
right,
most for-profit broadcasting, there's a fundamental problem, which is that because they are advertising supported, they are essentially the objective of the broadcaster is to create an environment that is conducive to selling consumer goods.
Okay.
And
well, yeah, Mad Men taught me that. So yeah, I learned all that from Mad Men. Yeah.
Right, and from the product integrations on Mad Men.
Right.
But I love Mad Men.
Well,
And, and that means in part maximizing audience, but also, not doing things that would make it difficult to sell stuff or to have sales relationships with people. That means that, there's tons of, why is there so much tech media on the internet? It's because there's a lot of consumer money in tech because you can sell people something every 18 months. And people who buy a lot of tech have a lot of money to spend, and those people like tech media. And so it's a virtuous circle or a malevolent circle. And I'm not against that existing. And I don't think that that's necessarily the worst model. But it is a real downside of much of the media in this country.
right.
The advantage of donor-supported media or audience-supported media, which also comes with its own costs, but the advantage is that, when I am creating something, I am creating it to make an impact on the audience. And I don't have to sell anyone anything. I don't have to help anyone else sell anyone anything. I just have to make something that has enough impact on people that they voluntarily support it. And I do that in part selfishly because that is what I would rather be working on.
Right.
And, as I said, there's not, I don't think it's like a profound fundamental corruption that destroys all truth. And, I'm no, with all due respect to Dick Gregory, one of the greatest comedians of the 20th century, I'm sure that his position is far beyond my own on this one.
Right. Yeah.
But
I didn't.
It's also
I didn't
far
expect
beyond
you
my.
to share that. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's also far beyond my own on topics such as how many people did the government disappear during the Rodney King riots? He thinks thousands. I think probably none.
Right. You know what? It's because it was in quoting that interview. Like I re-listened to it because I haven't listened to it in forever because I only used the one snippet for the theme song. But I was re-listening to him and he was talking about the Malaysia flight and JFK. So he's a man full of theories and knowledge that all of us are not privy to. With all due respect to him. So yeah, I didn't expect you to share the same sensibilities, but you never know.
I saw that dude speak one time at San Francisco State when I was in high school, and I remember being struck by two things. He was old even then. He was probably 70.
Right.
But I remember thinking, number one, he's still really funny. I was like, that was
right.
really funny that whole time. Like, I was really impressed at how funny he was. And then the other thing I remember was, wow, he's way out there.
Okay.
And I say this as like, look, my own father was on the helped found an organization that was on a FBI domestic terrorism list for a while. So like, I'm not, and I grew up in San Francisco, so I'm not unfamiliar with out there lefties.
Right.
And I was
Right.
like, oh yeah, this is some stuff. This is something else coming out of Dick Gregory right now. Just a couple times he really veered into whoa. But anyway, he was real funny. And he is one of the greatest comedians of the 20th century, and we tip our hat to Dick Gregory. But my point is that like fundamentally, it means a lot to me to be responsible primarily to my audience and not to selling things on behalf of advertisers. And so, that's a great gift to me as a creator, and I think it makes for a better product for the audience overall. It's not necessarily the top way to make the most money, but we have managed to make enough money to support doing it. So I'm very grateful for that. I mean, the truth is that there's like all kinds of different ways to do creative work of various types, whether it's media or art or whatever. And I think that like the most important thing is not to judge like, oh, are you getting rich off this? Or even, is this your living? But rather like, is this part of your life? You know, like, is expressing yourself part of your life? And I often think of, there's this piece in the Smithsonian Folk Art Museum, which is in DC, shares a building with the National Portrait Gallery.
Okay.
And it's called The Throne of the Third Heaven of the Nation's Millennial Assembly. I think I probably got that right.
Okay.
And basically, was this man who was a janitor, rented a garage for like 20 years. And when he died, the landlord figured out that he died and had to cut the lock to get in. And when he cut the lock to get in, there was this spectacular like altar and throne made out of basically found objects and tinfoil. But it's one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. I mean, it's just really spectacular. And this man has been making.
I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's astonishing. And when you look at a picture, it's hard to get a sense of how the scale, like it's the size of a room. And it's just it's an amazing, spectacular thing. And this guy was not a trained artist, and he was a weird guy who thought God was talking to him, and you know, all this stuff. But like sometimes I think about that guy, and you know, he had a real job. He worked at like the General Services Administration or something as a janitor. And I think of like, oh, he just found a part of his life to express the most important stuff to him. And that to me is like the essential part. Like whether it's, oh, I make a podcast as a hobby, I write a blog, I do whatever. Like if there's some part of your life that you feel like is, you know, answers to a higher calling of some kind, that seems like the important thing to me, rather than judging by, oh, I have the biggest audience. Oh, I make my whole living this way. Oh, I make half my living this way. Oh, I make a great living this way. Oh, I make a poor living this way.
I like the way you put that. I know there's a lot of podcasters, both hobby and / entrepreneurs that are listening. So yeah, that's good to hear, though. Especially I like that perspective. The last thing I have for you from a podcast question is, Can you talk about your relationship with the godfather of the podcast interview, Mark Maron and WTF? Can you talk about your role in that or just?
Yeah, totally. So Mark is has been one of my favorite comics for many years. When I was in college, my now wife was in college in New York, and I would fly out and visit her, and we would go to the Luna Lounge, which was the big alternative stand-up show in New York at the time, and see Mark and, other folks like Eugene Merman and Dimitri Martin and whatever.
Okay.
But we'd see Mark, and Mark was always just an amazing comedian to me, because then as now, I think his greatest superpower is revealing as much kind of like upsetting personal information as you can, like letting as much darkness out of his own soul as is humanly possible, while still retaining the audience and being really funny.
Right.
And it's sometimes, it always, like in watching him do stand up, it always felt like it was like a contest that he was having with himself. Like, how much darkness can he do and still not lose the audience?
Right.
By using his superpower of being a crazy, super funny guy. That is to say, crazy, not insane, but crazy as in very.
Gotcha.
And so Mark had been on the show a couple times over the years by phone. I had never met him in real life. And when he first started WTF, he started doing it at Air America. He had been fired from Air America for the second time. And he and his producer still had access cards to the building. And so they would just go in and do it at night when nobody was there. So they did that.
Was that Brian, the same guy he has now, or is that a different guy?
Yeah. That was Brendan. Yeah, Brendan.
Brendan, I said Brian. Okay, cool. All right.
They've been partners. Brendan is a truly great producer. And And so yeah, they would just go in, and like maybe Brendan still worked there or something. Anyway, the point is that they would just go in and record it. But then Mark was going through a divorce and stuff, and he moved back to his house in Los Angeles, and so he didn't have access to that studio anymore. And he remembered that he knew me, and that I was a podcast guy, and emailed me and was like, "Hey, do you have any advice about this podcast thing?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll help you, Mark." Like, I was just glad to do it because I like Mark,
Right.
both personally and as an artist. And so I, I spent half a day one time helping him figure out what equipment to buy and helping him set up his equipment and stuff, and gave him and Brendan a little bit of podcasting advice. As I said, Brendan's an exceptional producer, and I never gave them any creative advice.
Okay.
They have a great vision for the show, and it's sort of. He actually lives one neighborhood over from me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, I gave him the producer of Jordan Jesse Go, Brian, was my intern, and then worked for Mark for a year, maybe as a sort of semi-paid intern. After that, because Mark was like, "Hey, do you know anybody who can come over here and help me with this? Because, whatever." And I'm chewing this nicotine gum and it's not enough.
Right.
But so Brian helped him out some. And then, me and my former producer on Bullseye, then The Sound of Young America, Nick, helped the two of them, helped Brendan and Mark produce a public radio version of WTF, which was marginally successful.
Gotcha.
And I mean, it was as successful as you would think that WTF would be on public radio.
Right. Yeah. I got you. I'm a big fan.
So a combination of it being great and people being like, "How many bleeps is illegal in an hour?"
Right.
Like, doesn't matter how many bleeps, and they're like, "We're not sure." But yeah, and we actually had some help from Ira Glass on that.
Okay.
Ira Glass kind of stepped in and gave us an assist to help make that happen. So I'm very grateful to Ira for that.
What a dream team! But keep talking about. I'm so like, if you're telling me that Jesse Thorn, Mark Maron, and Ira Glass are all in this, are all working, and obviously all your wonderful producers as well, as you mentioned, Nick, Brian, Brendan. I can't even. I'm jealous, man. but anyway, go ahead. So.
The nice thing is Ira has the juice in public radio to like make a call and be like, "Come on now," and then somebody gives you some money or whatever. And so I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to Ira. Ira's always been very, very kind. And supportive.
I just realized about Ira that he knows how to get the money. And I was listening to him on long form, and he was talking about their model for This American Life. Their pitch wasn't necessarily the show. It was, hey, we know how to go get the money. We know how to do sponsorship and get the money. And I thought that was such an interesting take that, obviously he knew the content was good, but it was more about his model as far as getting the money. So I'm more in awe of Ira Glass and his ability. And now obviously it speaks for itself, but what, his vision, I'm sure, again, with all you guys matched up together. Yeah. And his he can affect change probably like few people can.
Well, Mark is a hustler. I mean, Ira's a hustler.
Right.
Mark is sort of a hustler. Brendan helps. But Ira has, basically Ira spent 20 years figuring out how public radio works. And then when he was done with that 20 years, he's like, "Okay, I'm going to do my thing and let's make it work." And he did it. And he's always run his show, not just creatively, but on the business end, which is very unusual. And it's very unusual for someone to do as good a job as he has. And, he's always done it in the interest of creating the best product he can, and getting it to as many people as possible. Ira's a really impressive guy in a lot of ways. But anyway, so I've been friends with Mark for a long time, and I lent a hand a couple times.
Okay.
But I can't take any credit for his particular genius, which is really remarkable. I feel like I've learned a lot from Mark,
Right.
as an interviewer and as a broadcaster, which is almost borderline annoying. He would be so much better at it than me, but
Right.
that's okay. That's okay. Good work, Mark.
Yeah, no doubt. Right. Yeah.
He's a good guy.
See, because he's got that, like he talks about it. He's got that need to connect with folks, and I think that just comes across so well, in what he does. But anyway, okay. So appreciate you explaining that, because I knew there was a connection tangentially, but I didn't know. You know what? Because I guess I've never heard your episode with him on his show. I saw it earlier.
Complained about nerds the whole time, as I recall.
Okay. Well, that.
Mark doesn't even tell you that he pressed record, for one thing.
Yeah.
And you're like sitting there, you're like, oh, I guess we're doing the show now. Like even I, a seasoned professional, hadn't figured that out. But then, yeah, we just complained about mean nerds.
Okay. All right. Well, no, then I will have to go check that out. I probably need to renew my subscription so I can go to the back catalog. But I was just listening to a BBC documentary on Sylvester. I don't know what you call him, disco singer, for lack of a better. He's so much more than that. But
iconic disco diva.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that sounds weird for me to say. But I like his story. I like his music. I think I like his music because it reminds me of Trading Places when they're playing. Do you want to? What's it called? Do you want to rock or do you want to funk? Whatever it's called. But anyway, but I was listening to a documentary on him, and I was watching the new Netflix documentary on Janis Joplin. Blah blah blah. So the point is, they all went to San Francisco, right? And obviously, there's countless. Those are just two people, but there's countless others that have gone to San Francisco. And you mentioned growing up there. So what I wanted to ask you was just, your role in culture now and pop culture, how do you think growing up in San Francisco influenced your life and appreciation for the culture? Like I love San Francisco. I've only been once, but it was an awesome trip. But actually, growing up there and having that openness, for lack of a better term, how do you think that city specifically has influenced you?
Well, I mean, I think for one thing, I think the city is what made me happen in a way, because both of my parents were, like Janis Joplin and Sylvester, people who came to San Francisco because they wanted to start a new and particular kind of life. My dad grew up until he was a teenager in Kansas City, and then his teenage years in Glendale, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, and was in the Navy very early in his life, and then went to UC Berkeley and was an organizer in the veterans movement.
Okay.
And my mom is from the Washington, D.C. area and lived for, 15 years, went to college in D.C., lived in D.C. for 10 or 15 years, and then moved to San Francisco basically to start a new life and hopefully have kids and that kind of thing. And my parents were only together for a relatively short time, but, in some ways, the fact that San Francisco was this place where people would come to start a life like that is the reason that I even exist.
Right.
But beyond that, I mean, I think there's a few really important ways that that it changed the course of my life, that I'm a different person than if I had grown up in Dubuque or in Manhattan or something. My friend Andrew Nas, who's a hip hop critic, he lives in the Bay and in fact now has a great record store in Oakland. But Andrew, the first period of time where he lived in the Bay, he called me one time. He's like, man, I go to a party here. Everybody's got a fucking t-shirt company. He's like, if they don't have an art collective or a record label, they got a fucking t-shirt company. And I was like, yeah, man, that's the Bay. That's what makes it so hot. That's what's so great about it. Like everybody is there to pursue that dream. And that dream is not about stepping on the other people. It's not like a dog-eat-dog world in the way that people think of going to New York is. And I love New York, obviously, too.
Right.
It's a place where like, at least, before the tech boom, was a place where like if you were going to like, you know, if you were just making rap tapes and working at a restaurant, that was fine. And it wasn't about, you know, like I think like the story of Master P, where like he comes to the Bay, like learns how to hustle, then goes back to New Orleans and makes his $1 billion or whatever.
You know, I didn't know that. So I feel like I'm really familiar with Master P, just, you know, obviously by distance. And I didn't know that he went to the Bay and learned some hustle. Okay, that's interesting.
No, he learned it all. He learned it all in the Bay. But I think the thing is like in the Bay, you're more likely to get E40, which is to say that like 40, he's actually had a few national hits recently. But
right.
But generally speaking, you know, Bay hip hop is Bay hip hop, you know, like nobody is
sprinkle me, Jesse.
Yeah, nobody, it's its own world and people are making a living and it's fine. And like, it's not about national domination or I got to get to LA, or I got to get to New York. It's about people who are building their own thing, their own vision across cultures. I mean, even within hip hop, you know, you see whatever, you know, I'm trying to give you a good example, but you know, a hypothetical example, you know, you see 40 and Boots Riley doing a track together, you know?
Right.
And that is, you know, that don't get me, I mean, hip hop is a great connector, but that's still a transcultural thing, you know, from the ultimate hustler to the ultimate, literal self-identified revolutionary communist.
I mean, Juicy J and Katy Perry do music together, so yeah, right.
Well, yeah, that's true. But you know, Juicy J's just taking the money that's being offered to him. I don't think,
right.
I don't think Juicy J is like, oh, I got to do a record with Katy Perry. Outside of like, man, you get paid really good to do records with Katy Perry. No offense to Katy Perry, who I think is pretty good.
Right, no doubt.
We're getting pretty far off track here. My point is that like the Bay is like a really vibrant place where there is this expectation of cross-cultural communication. There's this expectation of multiculturalism. There's this expectation that creating is going to be part of your life. All of those things are just built into the culture of the place. And they come along with stuff like, you know, I mean, people here in LA hate people from the Bay because they're so self-satisfied, you know?
Right. Okay.
Which I hear it, you know, I understand that. I am self-satisfied. But, you know,
I like that term, self-satisfied. I like that.
Yeah, well, smug, whatever, you know, right?
Right.
They think they're so fucking great.
Of course.
But it's like, yeah, the shit's pretty great.
Right. It's like, have you been here? Like, look around, motherfucker. Like, it's nice.
and you know, you know, it is, you know, it's cosmopolitan in some ways, but in some ways it's kind of provincial. You know, I think that how great it is leads people to kind of hesitate to look over the wall and see what else is going on. You know, that's the reason that Master P goes to New Orleans to get rich. But overall, I think those are those kind of essential qualities, that there's like this expectation of cross-culturalism. There's this expectation of creativity that, you know, when I talk to creative people, often when I'm talking to them, they tell me the story of their adolescence as a story of, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here and be something else. And I know that for me as a teenager at an arts high school in San Francisco, my feeling was, man, this is fucking great. This is great. Like, I had a lot of problems in my life overall. Don't get me wrong. But it was like, yeah, this is great. And, you know, that it's really been challenged, and especially in the last 10 years, but generally in the last 20 years with the tech economy. And, you know, San Francisco is a peninsula, and there's only so many places to build houses. And, you know, the housing crisis is out of control. The cost of living crisis out of control. And people have now been pushed out of San Francisco and now out of the East Bay and out of the Bay Area entirely, who want to have that kind of creative life. So it's a much more difficult situation now. When I go home, especially with the neighborhood I grew up in, it's almost unrecognizable. But there still is a certain element of sometimes pie in the sky idealism, but idealism nonetheless, like my wife and I have joked about whether we would ever send our kids to like a really crunchy granola school, super hip, like a super hippie school. And we were like, if we still lived in the Bay Area, we probably wouldn't, because it'd be kind of overkill. Like they'd be real soft, And,
Right.
But like,
You can't have that.
but like here in LA, like we feel like there's like this deficit of idealism. Like there's this, like people are pretty self-interested, and it's kind of the shitty parts of being a hippie tend to be prevalent, like juice cleanses or whatever.
Right.
And we really wish that there's tons of it. And LA is a huge city that encompasses many, many cultures and people. But like the general vibe, we're like, man, if here in LA, like maybe we should send our kids to some weird fucking granola crunchy school, because at least they'll get the idea that like they could use their life to make the world better, rather than to succeed in the entertainment industry or whatever,
right.
or whatever else is going on in LA. So, it's a very different vibe, and I'm very, very grateful. I'm very grateful to be there. And that said, I think I'm grateful that I'm not there anymore, both because it gave me a chance to have some kind of third eye vision about it, and also just because it's I know a couple people from when I was a kid that make a ton of money working in tech or whatever, and they're doing okay, but
Right.
most of the people that I went to elementary school, middle school, high school with now, if I look at their Facebook feeds, it's just sadness basically about San Francisco.
No, right. Well, I think Facebook is kind of a breeding ground for a lot of sadness. I was talking. So, all right. So here's the last question I have for you. I wanted to get into, and I probably should have brought this up earlier, Mike, but I want to get into your thoughts on the culture vulture conversation. I'm assuming you're familiar with the term, but if you look it up, Urban Dictionary says, someone who steals traits, language, and or fashion from another ethnic or social group in order to create their own identity. And I bring that up from the standpoint of, like, I listen to, I don't know if you are familiar with Dame Dash and his rants against Leora Cohen. I'm sure you are, actually, what I mean. But so kind of want to get your opinion on that, because like I heard Leora Cohen, he used to run Def, this, but for our audience, ran Def Jam, with Russell Simmons, and is a big music exec, and actually, what is the label that does Fetty Wap right now? Anyway, he runs that now. But anyway, so I know him and Dame Dash have this. So I guess my question is, are you familiar with that? Not them specifically, but like I want to get your opinion on the whole culture vulture thing, because I know you've kind of. Because I want to talk to you about your conversation with like producer Jerry Hurwitz, and I want to ask you about what's up with all these Jewish guys running the music industry and black artists. So, the curator of the content, like, do you have an opinion on that attitude? Where white guys are into black music, black style, black culture, for lack of a better term, hip hop, whatever, and
well, I think there's sort of two pieces or two worlds that you're talking about. One is a broader question of culture and identity and cultural appropriation. And the other is a function of, business, and especially the record industry specifically. The record industry is and has been pretty fucked up. And there are people who there are people who have taken advantage of that to varying extents, combined with skills and talents they have, somebody like Leora Cohen or whatever. And it's very hard to extricate. It's very hard to pull apart the threads of which part of this is about someone being immoral, which part of this is about somebody being good at business and taking the opportunity when they can, which part of this is about who does and doesn't have access to capital. I think that's a really essential part of it.
Right.
Especially when you consider that like the average household wealth of a black person in the United States is less than $10,000, and the average household wealth of a white person in the United States is like 10 times that.
Good Lord.
Yeah, the difference in wealth is so much starker than people talk about income, but wealth is the difference.
Right.
And it's particular, it's capitalism. You have to have capital. And so, and it's also difficult to pick apart the part, which is that, the record business is tough for artists no matter what. Our new producer on Bullseye is a musician who was in some of the biggest indie rock bands of the last 20 years and was extraordinarily successful. But at the end of the day, he did not make enough money to not just take a job.
Right.
So there's a lot of people who are disappointed because their careers didn't go the way they wanted, where the record company probably lost money on them. That's a real thing. That thing about most artists, the record company loses money on. That's one of the reasons why it's so hard to make it as an independent artist, is because you don't have the luxury of a record company that's going to put the $1 million up front that it takes to roll the dice on you, right?
Right. Okay.
So it's a really tricky and complicated situation. I think the answer is that a lot of people, Jewish or otherwise,
right? Yeah. No disrespect to the tribe. I love the tribe. No disrespect.
Sure. Who have access to both to some combination of savvy, skill, and capital, take advantage of people, because you bet they do.
Right.
There's also plenty of people who make their own careers of things. There's counterexamples too. There's always Master P.
Of course.
And I think there's probably plenty of very moral people on that side of the record business, and there's probably plenty of artists who behaved like artists and not like business people, and acted like babies, got treated like babies, and got mad when it didn't work out. That sounds harsher than I intended it. It goes in all directions in the record industry, but I do think that, in some ways, one of the only good things about the collapse of the record industry is that it does reduce some of that disparity of power that comes, especially right at the beginning, when it used to be that, like, you had to, like, I interviewed Ishmael Butler from Digable Planets and Shabazz Palaces and everything.
Okay.
And he talked about
cool like that, right? Yeah, that's cool like that, hip like that. The Digable Planets, right? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, he talked about, what they did to get a deal was, they brought a tape and just stood outside of record companies and just talked to everyone who went in and out. And if you're in that position and the record company has that much power, like, what the heck is your lawyer going to say to you, even if you have a good lawyer, when you're signing that contract?
Right.
When the power disparity is that huge, how's that going to work out right? Even if you have a manager who's sharp, who knows what's going on and isn't just a 17-year-old dumbbell.
Right.
Which you are, presumably. Like, if you're signing a record contract, you're probably a 17-year-old dumbbell.
Of course.
It's just reality.
Right. That's the point, right?
People barely get to sign second record contracts. When they sign second record contracts, they're usually pretty good. That's all those contracts that Prince signed in the late 90s and 2000s,
Right, yes. Right.
So anyway, the point here is there's a lot of people sticking it to a lot of people in a lot of places, but one of the nice things about the collapse of the record industry is that I think that disparity in power has been reduced to some extent, simply because the internet allows people to get music to everyone without anything. These people, you can record your song at your house and make a video with your phone for real that even looks pretty good if you got some buddies. I mean, that's what Odd Future were doing, you know? That's how they got on.
Okay.
So you both have access, and also the record companies don't have that much money to offer you anyway. So the power balance is a little less. Now, the broader cultural question, I mean, that's a tricky question. I can speak to it for like what my own personal experience and perspective has been. Obviously, if your audience can't tell, I'm a white guy.
Well, I'm going to post your picture so that they'll know. But yeah, right.
Yeah, they probably could have guessed.
Hey, but he's one of the coolest white boys. So he's on our side, guys.
That's kind of you. But like, so for me, you know, I grew up in a weird circumstance, which is that I grew up in a relatively tough, predominantly non-white neighborhood, but in San Francisco, where every neighborhood is 4 blocks from every other neighborhood. So, you know, I could walk 3 or 4 blocks from my house and be in an upper middle class neighborhood and, you know, I was in a lower middle class neighborhood and half a block from the projects, you know?
Gotcha.
But I didn't live in the projects. I'm grateful that I didn't. And, you know, I was the city kid at private schools out of San Francisco in my adolescence. And then I went to a public arts high school.
Okay.
And, you know, my parents were poor for much of my childhood until they sort of joined the middle class late in my teenage years. But they were also like super educated. You know, my dad had both of them had parts of advanced degrees, and my mom got a master's degree and my dad got an MBA when I was a teenager.
Oh wow, okay.
And you know, like there was never any question like, oh, is he going to go to college or whatever, right? Of course I was going to go to college. All I did was like read books and, you know, whatever.
Right. Listen to radio, right?
Yeah, and my parents, I had plenty of social connections with upper middle class people and all that stuff.
Okay.
So it was a kind of a mixed experience. But on the other hand, like I did have to be careful not to buy blue Nike Cortezes because the neighborhood was Norteño and they wore red Nike Cortezes, right?
Okay.
So like it was a mix of different stuff. And my survival strategy in that situation, if people can't tell from how I talk, was to be the guy that was so white that nobody even cared. Like to be past, like just no one would ever dream that I was set tripping. And I didn't have enough money in my pocket to be worth jumping.
Right.
And so I got through it pretty fine because I went to nice alternative schools and, you know, it was fine. You know, I got jumped a few times, but like, I was just thinking today, like, hey, I made it all the way through childhood without ever really getting my ass beat, you know? Like, I'd have never been to like, one time somebody punched me on the street. But besides that, like, I've never, like, he didn't like kick me when I fell to the ground crying.
Right. Okay.
So, you know, like it's sort of my strategy was just to try to be the person that I was. And that part of that person was, you know, like I grew up in a situation where, of course, I listened to KMEL. Of course, I listened to the Loonies. That was just part of what was going on. And it made sense. And, you know, the only thing, my parents divorced when I was like 3, like the only thing they agree on is like basically James Brown. You know, so like
okay,
that's the music that was playing in my house. Like it's not like I was like rebelling against my parents who were listening to the Carpenters. You know, like my mom went to the P-Funk Earth Tour. I mean, the Mothership Tour.
Right.
The Earth Tour was in like 1996. But like my mom saw the Mothership at RFK Stadium in Washington D.C. in the Chocolate City where she lived. And, you know, she lived in Washington, D.C. There weren't any white people around. All her friends were black, you know?
Okay. Oh, okay. So you got deep roots. Okay. I got you. Right.
And my dad was a veterans activist. You know, vets aren't all white dudes. And the white dudes that there are pretty raw.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, it was what I was. And what I, you know, my own strategy for this has been just to be the person that I really am. Like, I don't need to look to hip hop culture to give me credibility for having been from the hood or whatever. Like, I don't need that. Like, I'm the person that I am. I do really love hip hop and always have, and that's part of who I am. But, I also love Randy Newman.
Okay.
Like, granted, mostly like on the music side. I don't love
I
that
understand.
anyway. But
Right, I got you.
But in general, like, I also love the Kids in the Hall are a huge part of who I am, or Monty Python,
Right, okay.
So my own strategy has been to try and respect who other people are and try and take a holistic approach, a holistic vision, that they're not defined by whether it's their race or their gender or whatever. That's obviously generally in America an important part of who we are, but it's not the sole one. And hope that they will take me that way too. And one of the nice things about having this show where I once in a while I'm interviewing Prodigy or something, who really, Prodigy really had a very difficult adolescence. One of his stories is about his dad taking him for a drive and being drunk and saying, "Hold on right here," and then going in and robbing a jewelry store while he was like 8 years old, sitting in the passenger seat of the car.
Wow. And you talking about Prodigy of Mobb Deep fame, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure people know that, but I just want
the '90s electronic act.
Hey, I just want to make that distinction. You never know. You never know.
I think that at first in that situation, usually what that guy thinks, if I'm reading his eyes correctly, is like, what the fuck is this white guy's deal? You know, just like, who the fuck is this dude? And if I just show like, hey, I am who I am, like I really am the dude that I am, and I know about this and care about this, and I'm not trying to be the downest dude ever, I just am trying to be the dude that I am. Then I usually get really good results. And that's true, across, it's the same if I talk to Dolly Parton, like, what the fuck do I know about the Blue Hills of Kentucky?
Right.
I've been to West Virginia a couple times. It's very pretty. But, generally speaking, all I can do is just like offer the true authentic version of myself and my perspective on the world. And it's makes it hard as an entertainer because it's a little hard to read. It's a little confusing. Why is this white guy in the necktie talking about rap music? And why is he talking, what is this? Like, it's a difficult thing to figure out in a few seconds. If you compare it to Guy Fieri, all you need to do is look at Guy Fieri from the eyebrows up and exactly who Guy Fieri is.
Right, no doubt, right.
So in entertainment, it's a little tricky, but it's all I got, I am the person that I am, and I just try and be nice and sincere about that and see how it works out. And it usually works out okay. People sometimes are like, what the fuck? And I understand that, especially black people about white people, but I'm like, yeah, well, they're dealing with a legacy of 400 years of horrible racism, and that's just here in America.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, if they want to be suspicious for the first 6 minutes we're talking, yeah, I understand that, but then I find that if I'm patient and myself, people are like, oh, this guy really is patient in himself. It's sort of like when I was a kid on the bus, on the back of the 14 Mission bus in San Francisco. There was always the option of, oh, white boy got jokes,
Right.
Like, just, you bring something real, like, people are people. You bring something real, real, recognize real. So, that's been my approach to that shit. And I just I do my best to listen some and be myself. And I don't know, maybe I am stealing hip hop culture. I can't tell you the answer, but
I wasn't necessarily accusing you, but
no, not at all, not at all. But I've certainly been accused of that in the past, and I get it. I'd be weird about it too. It's weird.
What? Yeah, well, I mean, because what's my man Juan Epstein? Rosenberg? There's a history of in that whole thing. But I think your explanation, hey, you're just, it's just you, man. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the one thing that I think as a teenager was a little uncomfortable with and always tried to avoid was the idea that even in a deep and authentic way, you are completely identifying with somebody else's culture because your culture, especially as an adolescent, doesn't feel right when you try it on. It feels itchy or whatever. And that I'm a little less sympathetic to. I mean, I understand it, but that's that kid that just shows up to prep school one day in a tracksuit, carrying a ghetto blaster.
Right.
And I see where that comes from. I mean, I have empathy for that kid. Adolescence is hard. But I knew when, even as a teenager, I was like, I don't want to be that dude. Part of my equation was always I need to just own the person that I am. I need to own my whiteness, my privilege that comes with my whiteness and my straightness and my dudeness. I need to understand that that's a real thing that has power in the world. And I can't just shed the responsibility that it comes with by being down. And also that sometimes I just want to hang out and read the Bill James historical baseball abstract or some other white people shit like that. Sometimes I just want to hang out, watch a Whit Stillman movie. Just want to watch Metropolitan again.
I feel you. No, well, and that makes you uniquely white and uniquely American. It just makes you a person, right? You have a lot of you have a lot of interests, so I got you. No, hey, I really like Ambrosia, and I can't really explain it. I'm really into 70s and 80s yacht music and boat rock, and I don't know how to explain it. I just like it,
I thought you were talking about that kind of fruit salad with the whipped cream and stuff.
No, I think that's disgusting. No, I mean Ambrosia. That's how I feel. Biggest part of me, 70s Ambrosia. That's what I mean. Blue-eyed soul. That's my shit.
You got those. Look, if we're talking about black people with Tina Marie records or Hall & Oates records, that's not that special. Let's be real.
Hey, I said Ambrosia, not Tina Marie or Hall & Oates, okay? I should get a little bit of credit. So Christopher Cross, Kenny Loggins, give me a little bit of credit, right?
All right. That's the next step down. That's the next step down the Blue-Eyed Soul road.
Okay. All right.
I think that road ends where I am, which is where you find yourself being Robin Thicke's first album is dope. I've tried to convince people of that before, and
you know what? You know what? You talking about his first time when he had the long hair and was riding on the bike back in the day, that
yeah,
Robin?
That shit was hot. That's a dope album.
You know what? I might give it to you on that because I don't think people realize, because now they just see the sexy soul, Paula Patton, Blurred Lines guy. But yeah, when he was riding through the bike and had the long hair, he was a completely different guy. But I dug that Robin Thicke back then. I like him now too, but I dug that guy.
You know what? If we're gonna get really real right now, not only do I like Blurred Lines, I can top how much I can absolutely beat that for lack of credibility, things that I really fuck with. So number one, yeah, Robin Thicke, Blurred Lines. Yeah, I fuck with that song pretty hard. I still am pretty into it, even though it does have a questionable moral pedigree in more ways than one. But that's
which I disagree with that in the ruling, by the way. But it's a whole nother episode. I disagree with.
No, I'm cool with the moral pedigree on the Marvin Gaye front. I'm less cool with the rapiness.
Okay. You know what?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag,
Good point.
So that's basic shit. You want to know about my next level embarrassing shit I fuck with?
Yes, sir.
I fuck with the Alan Thicke song "Sweaty and Hot" from the Crystal Light Aerobics Championship. I was listening, somebody sent me that song as a joke, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, no, I'm kind of fucking into this song. This is a dope song. I like "Sweaty and Hot" by Alan Thicke from the Crystal Light Aerobics Championship. So that's my Thicke-related embarrassing.
Well, you know that's now being, that'll be played on this episode now. I thought he only sang the theme song to Different Strokes. I didn't know he had a larger dossier of.
Dude, that dude's got all kind of songs. That dude's got all kind of songs, but one of them is Sweaty and Hot from the Crystal Light Aerobics Championship. And it's kind of a dope song. I like it. It's corny. It's all about doing aerobics. It's like meeting girls at the gym and that kind of shit. But it's a fucking cool song. I like it.
Hey, well, it'll be on this. I've never heard it, but it will be on this episode. So you know what? I just pulled it up on YouTube, and I'm looking at him. Oh, my God. He's in a sweatsuit. I can't wait to listen to this song. Okay. All right. Cool.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm going to go home and take care of my children now.
But I do appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much for your time. I know people can reach you, Maximum Fun. So
go to MaximumFun.org. That's where you'll find all our podcasts. And you can find Bullseye on a lot of public radio stations around the country. Not all of them yet. If you don't have it on yours, ask for it. But yeah, MaximumFun.org is where you can find all that different stuff. But honestly, why are you doing that when you could be watching the Crystal Light Aerobics Championships on YouTube right now? That should be your real priority.
No doubt. We're about to tweet that out. No doubt, man. Well, hey, appreciate it. Thanks so much. And like I said, I hope I can talk to you again. Thanks so much, man. Do you still do the cruise or no?
No, the cruise.
I have social anxiety and I really want to go, but
you blew it. Max FunCon. Come to Max FunCon next year.
Awesome. All right. All right, welcome back. We'll keep this brief so we can enjoy Alan Thicke's Sweaty and Hot, one of Jesse's favorites. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @Vocal Report, use the hashtag The Vocal Minority. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.